Listen closely, folks, because tonight I'm going to tell you a true story, one that's etched deep in the memory of a remote corner of northern Vietnam, right near the border. It happened back in 1998, a time when these rural areas were truly isolated miles from anywhere. Life was tough, really tough. Folks scraped by with whatever they could grow, and education hadn't quite reached them yet. That meant a lot of people had limited understanding of the world, and sadly, that played a part in what unfolded. Now, this isn't a ghost story, not really, but there are details here that will stick with you and haunt your thoughts long after the telling. This event shook an entire region, and people still whisper about it even today. Stories get passed around, you know how it is, and things get added, embellished. What I'm telling you now is just one version of what happened that year. Picture this. Vast, endless forests stretched for miles in those parts of northern Vietnam, with treacherous, winding paths. You'd walk 3 or 4 kilometers before you'd even find a small shack, a sort of lookout point for the forest guards. These guards worked for a landlord protecting the timber, but they'd also hunt a bit to put food on their own tables. Our first character is a man named Dai, one of those forest guards. One bitter cold night, out in that wild, desolate forest, the kind of place that just makes you feel uneasy, Dai took a few sips of wine to warm up before he finally drifted off to sleep. Around midnight, a deafening explosion jolted him awake. He grabbed his flashlight, heart pounding, and started searching around, wondering what on earth had just happened. A little while later, in the distance, over where the forest met another section, he saw it, a flash of fire, then thick black smoke billowing out. Back then, people would often set fires at night to smoke out beehives. But Dai found this strange. An explosion? Just for a beehive? Still, the wine was in his system, and he shrugged it off, going back to sleep. The next morning, he had to go to town for errands, and the whole thing just slipped his mind. He never told anyone. A week passed. Then San, another hunter, a man who supplied wild meat to restaurants in town, headed into the forest with his traps and hunting rifle. He walked for hours, couldn't find a thing. Just as he was about to give up and head back to his shack, he spotted them, a huge swarm of flies buzzing wildly. Any seasoned hunter knows what that means. There's a carcass nearby, and where there are dead animals, other wild game will eventually show up. So Sane, ever the opportunist, followed the flies. The trail led him to a small hill, and there it was, a patch of ground scorched black. Right in the middle lay a large, utterly blackened object, giving off a putrid stench. He approached cautiously, his stomach churning, and realized it was a burned animal carcass. Its 4 legs were curled up tight. In places, the flesh was oozing, contributing to the foul smell. Its mouth was grotesquely wide open, as if caught in a perpetual silent scream, revealing 2 rows of white teeth. Its eye sockets were choked with swarming insects, and its belly had been savagely torn open by wild animals. Its entrails strewn everywhere. At first glance, it looked like a monkey, but this was far too big to be a monkey. Passen pondered it for a moment, and then it clicked. Just a few days earlier, he'd heard whispers of a forest fire over in Cambodia, and tales of chimpanzees as big as a grown man roaming those parts. This creature, he thought, looked exactly like what he'd imagined. He knew that cow, which for those who don't know, is a traditional Vietnamese medicinal product made by boiling and concentrating animal bones, skin, and tendons for health benefits, was already precious if made from monkeys. But from a chimpanzee, that would be incredibly rare and many, many times more valuable. He was ecstatic, convinced he'd stumbled upon a true fortune. Overjoyed, Sen completely abandoned his hunt. He found some rope, tied it around what he believed was the chimpanzee, and began dragging it all the way back home. By the time he arrived, night had fallen. He left the carcass in his front yard, then went inside to wash the day's grimness away. Perhaps it was the exhaustion, but he didn't notice that as soon as he was inside, the sky opened up and it began to rain. And amidst the drumming of the rain, there was another sound, faint but distinct, a high-pitched whistling cry, like someone weeping in the night. The next morning, Sun headed to his relative's house asking for help butchering the chimpanzee. News travels fast in a small village, and it wasn't long before the whole community flocked to his house, eager to see this rare beast. Even the village chief came, confirming it was indeed a valuable chimpanzee because it resembled a monkey, but was as large as an adult. Someone puzzled asked why it had no tail, and was quickly assured that chimpanzees simply don't have tails. Everyone was a mix of belief and doubt until a forest ranger showed up for an inspection. And when the ranger, too, confirmed that chimpanzees have no tails, it solidified the villagers' conviction. But chimpanzees are protected animals. So the ranger told Sen to hold off, that he needed to report this find to his superiors. 2 days passed, and still, no word from the higher-ups. The carcass left out in the tropical heat was rapidly decaying, and Sun began to worry he'd lose his valuable prize, so he made a snap decision. He called his brothers and friends, and together they took the chimpanzee down to the irrigation canal to butcher it. There were more than 10 men, including Sun, participating. The whole village was buzzing with excitement. Like a festival, a true rarity they believed they'd found. Even the village chief, wanting a piece of this fortune, begged Sen to sell him some bones to make medicine. But after they'd stripped the meat, there wasn't much left, so Sun had to refuse. The news Sun had gone ahead and butchered the chimpanzee without waiting reached the ranger. He rushed back to the village only to find the carcass completely stripped of flesh. All that remained were the head and one left hand, which they hadn't quite finished with. The ranger, perhaps out of morbid curiosity or for official purposes, asked for the head as a souvenir. San's younger brother took the left hand, hanging it inside his own house. That very afternoon, villagers brought piles of firewood to San's house, and 3 massive pots were set up for boiling. It took them a grueling 3 days to extract the concentrated liquid. The bones were then painstakingly ground into a fine powder, added back to the liquid, and further reduced to make the precious cow. Only a few bone segments were saved, meant for decoration in wine jars. This cow was strangely pinkish, soft when it solidified, not hard at all, and it gave off a peculiar, strong, fishy odor. What was truly bizarre was how the boiling pot seemed coated in a thick, sticky grease. No matter how many times they scrubbed it or rinsed them, that greasy film just wouldn't come off. Mr. Sun kept half of the cow for himself and mixed the other half with rice wine, adding those decorative bone pieces. A few days later, the chimpanzee bone wine was ready. Esney generously gave some away, and soon everyone in the village was eager to try a sip. A few days after all this, Mr. Dai, the forest guard, finally returned to the village. He heard the buzzing news. Son had captured a chimpanzee and made a rare, valuable bone cow. Mr. Dai, however, was immediately skeptical. He knew that chimpanzees weren't native to their region, and Cambodia was dozens of miles away. How could a wild animal possibly escape a forest fire and run that far? The villagers, of course, scoffed at his doubts. Chimpanzees are strong, they argued. Running that far is nothing for them. To smooth things over, Son offered Dai some of the potent bone wine. But as the drinks flowed, Son started to provoke Dai, scoffing that he was ignorant, regretting that he hadn't rushed to the fire that night and lost out on a rare chimpanzee. The words stung. The drinking session hadn't even ended, but Mr. Dai, fueled by anger and the alcohol, threw down a challenge to everyone at the table. "Let's go back to that hill right now," he dared them. "Let's see what that thing really was." Their judgment clouded by drink, the men agreed. Around 4 in the afternoon that day, Dai and about 7 other men set off for the hill where the burned carcass had been found. When they arrived, they immediately felt something was off. A chimpanzee, a primate, dying in an open, treeless patch of ground? It just didn't make sense. They searched for a long time, their unease growing with every passing moment. And then someone shrieked, a sound of pure horror. Buried in the ashes, they found a piece of scorched fabric. A chill ran through them. Now everyone was starting to feel a cold dread creep in. They kept looking, their hearts pounding, and then they found something else, a silver shirt button still nestled in the dirt. They carefully gathered these chilling clues, putting them in an envelope which they gave to Dai to take to the authorities. Mr. Dai, however, was too terrified to bring the envelope into his own house. He tucked it into the fence outside, right in front of his home. Later, he would recount that he drank heavily that night, consumed by overwhelming fear. And in his hazy, half-drunk, half-sober state, he swore he saw someone, a shadowy figure, standing outside his house all night long. The next morning, Mr. Dai finally gathered his courage and went to the commune police to report what they'd found. By noon, provincial police investigators had arrived, and thankfully, the left hand that Mr. Sin's brother had hung in his house was still there. The police immediately took the hand for forensic examination. The results came back quickly, shattering any lingering doubts. It was a human hand. The police swiftly moved to confiscate whatever remained of the chimpanzee. But there wasn't much left, just a few small bone fragments already boiled down. Into the cow jars, the single hand, a human skull that the forest ranger had taken as a souvenir, and the bone pieces floating in the wine jars. The villagers, when they heard the horrific truth, were overcome with dread. They quickly discarded all the bone wine, dumping it out, wanting nothing to do with it. It took nearly a week, but finally the burned person, tragically mistaken for a chimpanzee, was identified. Her name was Lin from a neighboring district. Initially, the police suspected Miss Lin had been suffering from depression and had bought gasoline to commit self-immolation on that hill. but her family vehemently disagreed. They insisted she must have been murdered. Miss Lin was a vibrant, happy woman, they said, always cheerful, never cross with anyone. There were no signs whatsoever that she was depressed. And most damningly, all the jewelry she was known to wear was missing. Then Dai, remembering that terrifying night, stepped forward. He distinctly recalled hearing a loud explosion, like a gunshot, before he saw the smoke and flames. If it was self-immolation, how could there have been such a powerful bang? With this crucial detail, the police pivoted their investigation. They began to pursue it as a murder case. And about a month later, they had their answers. The police confirmed that Miss Lin had been involved in a secret illicit romantic relationship with a gardener, a farmhand who worked in that very forest. He was a drifter, an outsider, who had come to the area for work. But he was a man consumed by gambling and drink, buried under mountains of debt. Knowing Miss Lin wore a lot of gold jewelry, he cooked up a sinister plan. He'd ask her for money to pay off his debts. So he arranged to meet her that night at a shack in the forest, pretending it was for a romantic rendezvous. But when he tried to extort money from her and she refused, an argument erupted. He escalated quickly, threatening to kill her and steal her valuables if she didn't comply. Miss Lin, a woman, was no match for a burly man who spent his days doing hard labor. When she was distracted, when her guard was down, he ended her life with a hunting rifle. He stripped her of all, her precious jewelry and gold, stuffing them into his pockets. Then he hoisted her lifeless body onto his shoulder and carried it to the nearby hill. He didn't forget to grab a can of gasoline he kept in his shack. What he did next, at the hill, was even more monstrous. He pulled out his jungle knife and savagely cut open her abdomen. Why? To retrieve the bullet. He figured if anyone found the body, they wouldn't realize she'd been shot. After that, he doused her body with gasoline and set it ablaze to destroy all evidence. And if by some chance the fire didn't completely obliterate the body, the smell of burning flesh, along with her grotesquely mutilated organs, would surely draw in wild animals to finish the job, with the bullet gone and their secret affair unknown. He believed that even if the body wasn't completely incinerated or consumed by wild animals, or even if someone stumbled upon it, there would be absolutely no reason to suspect him. He confessed that after the heinous act, he calmly returned to his shack, meticulously cleaned up the crime scene, and then slept soundly as if nothing had ever happened. But as people say, evil deeds always catch up to you. Soon people noticed. The laborer, once drowning in debt, suddenly had plenty of money. He was paying off his debts, even generously buying drinks for his friends. A gardener's wages just didn't stretch that far. He quickly became a prime suspect. Once the police had their direction, they used their investigative techniques, and eventually, he broke down and confessed to everything. For the crimes of murder, robbery, and such a barbaric desecration of a body, he was condemned to the highest penalty dot in those days. Execution was still carried out by firing squad. He met his end beneath the barrel of a gun, paying for his sins. Many whispered that it was a fitting comeuppance, a dark mirror of how he had extinguished the life of his lover. But no matter how the killer met his fate, the image remains. A woman shot dead in the silent, desolate mountains at night, her body set ablaze, then dismembered and boiled into medicine and wine. That scene, that horrifying desecration, it lingers, a chilling echo that still haunts people to this day. She died so unjustly, and then her body was violated, tormented again and again. The most heartbreaking part? When it came time for her burial, all that could be laid to rest were a few jars of that medicine and some pitiful bone fragments that remained. It's a sight that leaves anyone who hears it with a profound, lingering sorrow and pity. This tragic tale is like a broken compass in a vast wilderness. What started as a simple fire and a hunt, events that are commonplace in such remote areas, became twisted by human ignorance, greed, and barbarity, leading everyone involved far off the true path until the horrifying truth was finally, violently revealed. The compass was there, but no one could read it until it was too late, pointing not to treasure, but to terror.